particularly, of course, when it comes to youth unemployment. Well, joining us now in our Johannesburg studio, as promised earlier, is SAFTU's General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi. Good evening to you, and thank you for talking to us tonight. I suppose the big story of the day has to be around this youth employment service. It is a welcome initiative by big business. What's your view?
Any creation of any job in the context of the crisis that we're going through must be a welcome move on the part of all South Africans, and including the announcements of today that suggest that the youth up to 1 million will be put on job training, and with the better possibilities of them getting absorbed by the private firms. So we have no qualms with that. But having said that, we want to warn almost immediately against what we can only refer to as false solutions, false hope. The crisis of unemployment, the biggest crisis we face in our country, is that too many of our people are unemployed. The real reason behind that crisis of unemployment is that we inherited an inappropriate growth path from apartheid and the colonial era. And that 24 years into our democracy, we have not changed the structure of the economy that continues to be dominated by the mining, finance, and heavy chemicals. It is that structure of unemployment that continues to reproduce poverty, unemployment, and inequalities. Today's announcement have absolutely almost nothing to do with addressing the real challenge of unemployment, and it's more like playing in the periphery in a manner that is not going to make any real difference to the crisis at hand.
One of the critical things that was said to be addressed by today's announcement was the fact that a number of our unemployed people are unskilled, and that's what this initiative tries to target. And one of the criticisms has been that in defending the rights of workers, unions often work at the expense of the unemployed, particularly in a country where there is such a massive skills shortage.
We need skilled workers in South Africa, but there are two problems. Our education system itself is in a crisis, at least the public education system. Every statistic that you're going to read, including the ability of our children to write, to read in comparison, tells you that the crisis is actually getting worse. Every statistic that you will read that shows you somewhere between 48 to 52% of our kids who get into grade 1 do not arrive at grade 12 in time. Tells you that there is a crisis. In fact, according to the NDP, they say 91% of our schools are dysfunctional, and that a whooping 72% of all the people who pass matric is only accounted by 12% of our schools. That's what is the crisis. It's a structural crisis. As long as you don't address that, you're going to unfortunately continue to see South Africa youth unemployment getting to the levels that it is currently in. 52.5% of our young people are unemployed, and that's a crisis that we have referred to as the ticking time bomb.
Of course, there's been a delay around the announcement of the implementation of the minimum wage. Is this something that you welcome? Because, of course, when we talk about minimum wage, we're not even talking about a living or decent wage. Is it an indication, perhaps, that the delays in proceedings at least means the issue is being taken seriously?
That's what we hope for. We have written letters to every political party in Parliament. We have called on them to delay this because we were worried that they were rushing this process in order to meet the deadline of implementing it on the 1st of May without an adequate consultation process. And we're happy, obviously, that there is a delay, and we only hope that that delay will mean that there is a meaningful engagement and consultation, more so with the people that will be affected. We reject the initial minimum wage. of 20 rand. We think that this is an insult, in particular when you look at it in the context of what we started with, that South Africa inherited a growth structure from the apartheid, and one of those growth, the features of that inappropriate growth structure is that we relied on semi-skilled and unskilled laborers from the former Bantustans, deliberately not trained in order to create cheap labor for the mining, for the agriculture, and for the rest of the industry. We are not breaking the backbone of that economic structure inherited from apartheid. 20 rand an hour, 18 rand for farm workers, 15 rand for domestic workers, 11 rand for extended public works program will do nothing outside insulting the workers and telling them that they must perpetually accept the conditions as those who are right at the bottom of the food chain. And we think that our MPs must listen to the cries of the farm workers directly and to respond to their cries.
You've called this as nothing less than selling out, but there are those who will say all of the problems you've described is an historical one, as you've admitted. We are here now, we still don't have those skills. How do we move forward by paying people higher wages when they don't have the skills to contribute to the economy appropriately?
Precisely. Why did we allow 24 years into our democracy a situation where our workers do not have the skills that they need, when we have been claiming that we are championing their education and training? Why do we allow billions to sit idling in the SETA system, unused most of the time, or allowing the fly-by-night training companies to just use them as a quick money-making schemes that do not contribute into skilling the South African workforce? Why do we have a situation? Is this not really an indictment on all of us, in particular the trade union movement, that have allowed itself to be so fragmented that we have actually, in 2014, 50% of the workers earning below 3,400, and now we are being insulted about this whole notion of half a loaf is better than nothing, in that we are going to be given 20 rand, 18 rand, 15 rand, and 11 rand. It's an insult. It would have been such a slap on the face of workers to introduce this on the very same day that is recognized internationally as their day that they should celebrate their triumphs and their tribulations.
There are those who would say, in your personal capacity as a veteran of the union movement, you've watched all of this that you are now criticizing unfold and haven't addressed it with the same vigor. And now that you're a little outside, certainly, of the tripartite alliance, you're criticizing everything that government and business are trying to do now. For example, the African Continental Free Trade Area is something that government has said could help South Africa move, and indeed the whole continent, towards a single market. We'll see more jobs in manufacturing. We'll see a game-changing initiative as far as that is concerned, and yet that is something you also have expressed criticism of.
No, let me start with the first one. It was a united COSATU that, in its response to the Marikana massacre, where workers who were demanding 12,500 were mowed down mercilessly in cold blood, where workers on their own led themselves, the farm workers, in deodorants, and a COSATU united, growing, and a powerful institution at that time said we need a national minimum wage. And at that time, COSATU Congress said our national minimum wage must be tagged around the national minimum living level of 5,400.
AMCU would beg to differ with those facts. AMCU would beg to differ with those facts. They would say they were the ones who led that protest against the 12,500 rand, and that you jumped onto the bandwagon afterwards.
They would be correct. At that time, COSATU didn't know how to respond to the crisis, because it was the biggest union, the NUM, that workers were rejecting and expressing a vote of no confidence against.
So fundamentally, as we're running out of time, Mr. Vavi, as we're running out of time, the criticism mainly is that you're now out in the cold. You were part of the union movement that watched all these things unfold. Initiatives are now being launched to try and deal with this, whether it's an African single market market system, or whether it's what we heard today, because you're on the outside, you're throwing water at everything?
No. That COSATU Congress, in its response to workers leading themselves because of the weaknesses inside the Federation, COSATU said we must pursue a radical economic transformation program, a program that have been abandoned in favor of 20 Rand, 18 Rand, 15 Rand, and 11 Rand. So that's a real correct reading of the history. COSATU was deliberately weakened, imploded, so that it can be the one now that signs that workers must get a way below the living level national minimum wage. In relation to your other question, if you have time, I can still address
Very quickly.
We support the principle of a free trade in Africa because we believe that when you trade amongst the nations of the continent, which have citizens of up to R1 billion, gives you the type of advantage that China have with its 2-3 billion citizens, or the Indians have with its population of 1 to 2 billion. So yes to that in principle. The problem we have is that we have not seen what is signed. We have not been consulted. We want to see it. We want to see the whole package so that we don't celebrate something that is going to bite us when it is implemented.
Claim no easy victories. Veteran Union Leader, General Secretary of SAFTU, Zwelinzima Vavi. Over to Francis. All right.